Making videos on YouTube has always been a dream of mine. Writing, recording and editing this stuff is a little time consuming and can be a bit stressful for sure, but it's rewarding to be able to put my 2 cents out there for people to see nonetheless. And I'm grateful I have a platform and a voice that people will hopefully listen to. But if you were to tell me that I'd be making a video on Bigmouth somewhere down the line, I think I'd put a gun in my mouth. I doubt I have to tell you dudes what Bigmouth is, but for the lucky few out there that don't know, Bigmouth is an adult animated series on Netflix created by Andrew Goldberg, Jennifer Flackett, Mark Levin and Nick Kroll, who may actually be my least favorite person on the planet. The show centers around a group of middle schoolers, mainly best friends Nick Birch and Andrew Glauberman, voiced by Nick Kroll and John Mulaney respectively, trying to survive puberty and all the gross and awkward shit that comes with it. And to guide them on their journey are the hormone monsters, these super sexed up creatures that talk to and get accustomed to pretty much all of the bullshit that happens in the show. If you haven't seen Bigmouth, you've definitely at least heard of it, in memes, on Twitter, maybe in a video that's infinitely better than the one you're about to watch. There's a lot of controversy surrounding the show, and it's definitely for a good reason. From the poor casting choices to certain characters to bad representation of bi and pansexuality. Oh yeah, and the constant full-blown child nudity. Like, this shit is nasty as fuck. Like, I was 14 when the show came out, which is only 1 year older than the characters in the show. And even then I was like, maybe this is a little too much. But without all that, the main consensus is the show just blows, which I don't 100% agree with, but I can totally see why people think that. But did it have to be like that? I really don't think so, and that's probably the worst part about the show to me, the huge waste of potential, and that's what this video is about. You already know that though, you saw the title, you know what you're getting yourself into. Anyway, this is why I think Bigmouth should have, or at least could have, been great. Right off the bat, I just want to say that this video is in no way me defending Bigmouth. This isn't me trying to justify any of the gross shit that's in this show or anything like that. I just think that with a proper direction it could have been something more. With that being said though, I think it's only fair that I talk about the very small number of things in this god-awful show that I don't completely despise. For one, the show isn't totally without its fair share of jokes. Like, the show can be kind of funny every now and then, which isn't very surprising considering the crew working on the show. Andrew Goldberg worked on Family Guy from 2016 to 2018, and Nick Kroll's worked on a bunch of stuff, a couple of his own specials, he was a consultant writer for the 2010 MTV Movie Awards, and he wrote an episode of The Life and Times of Tim, which I apparently can't shut the fuck up about on this channel, so it's not completely shocking that there's going to be a few good jokes in the show. But of course, for every joke that I find funny, there's at least 3 other jokes that either make me cringe, roll my eyes, or throw up in my mouth a little. Another thing that's good about the show kind of feels like a cheat to even add. Like I said, I was 14 when this show came out, so me and all of my friends that watched it found it at least a little bit relatable, if anything. I say it's a cheat because if you make a show about kids going through puberty, chances are at least one kid that's going through puberty and watching the show is going to see something they've done, or something that's happened to them at some point. Throw enough weird shit at the wall and eventually something's bound to stick, right? A few of the things that happen in the show are actually based off Nick Kroll and Andrew Goldberg's childhood, so it's not like they had to try too hard to think about stuff to write about. Which brings me to the last decent point I have on Bigmouth, and that's that as a concept, Bigmouth to me at least is a pretty good idea. A show about kids going through puberty, one of the most awkward and emotional times in their lives, with physical personifications of their hormones, sounds like a really great show. But I've got a whole other segment about that point, so I'll talk about it in a couple minutes. But now I want to talk about everything I don't think works in Bigmouth, and man, there is a lot of it. I'll start off with the stuff that I personally don't like, and then I'll get into what I think are the more glaring problems with the show. First off, I know I said that the show can be pretty funny at times, but they managed to overshadow the good jokes in this show with self-aware meta jokes. I seriously don't need to be reminded that I'm watching Bigmouth because that'll just make me sad. I wouldn't mind it so much if it was a rare occurrence, but it happens constantly. I mean, I think it does. I remember it happening. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't rewatched Bigmouth in preparation for this video, and as of writing this, I haven't even seen the newest season. I just don't know if I have the mental strength to watch this fucking show alone. Plus, I don't want to end up on some government watch list.
Moving pretty quick there. Why don't you have a seat right over there? Okay.
On a related note, and this is definitely more of a personal nitpick than anything, if you like the show, you might not even have this problem. But this show can be insanely annoying, specifically the characters that Nick Kroll voices. Again, this is my own issue with the show, but the voices he does for Lola, Rick, and that stupid fucking ladybug are just so grating to me, especially the ladybug. Seriously, I can feel years come off of my life when that thing shows up.
That's right, I'm back, you motherfuckers! Shut up! You shut up! Shut up!
Okay, now I can talk about the things in the show that are actual problems. One thing that's always confused me about Bigmouth is I have no idea who this show's meant to be for. I know the kids will watch whatever now, so it doesn't really matter. There's like 0 internet restriction at this point. I mean, I watched all sorts of horrors when I was a kid, and look at me now. But this show had to be written for some demographic, right? There's such a weird jumble of jokes and pop culture references that would go over a teenager's heads, and a couple adults. This is a show about teenagers going through puberty, so you'd expect it to be written more towards them. And if not, and this show is made specifically for adults to watch, why is there so much weird shit in it? Which brings me to the second and probably most talked about issue of this show, and that's the pretty much constant display of child nudity there is. I get it as a show about puberty and growing up, but there's honestly no reason why they had to put any of the stuff that they put in. It gets to a point where it's so bad that it overshadows the actual messages and points that this show has. Go ahead and ask anybody about Bigmouth, and I guarantee that the first thing they'll mention is how borderline criminal the show can be at times. It almost feels kind of exploitative to me, like they know how gross and shocking the show is and expect that to be the main focus and draw of the show. So now I've talked about Bigmouth as it is, I can talk about what it could have been. I said I think Bigmouth as an idea is pretty solid, and clearly so did Netflix, since they've managed to churn out 7 seasons with its 8th and final season on the way, along with a spin-off show Human Resources, which I'm going to talk about a little bit, since I think that was almost a decent version of Bigmouth. I think one thing that Human Resources did that made it a lot more enjoyable to watch was focus on adults, telling stories that tackle having and raising a baby, watching a loved one slowly die, and dealing with the grief after their death. I think it's cool that they brought in more monsters that embody human feelings like love, ambition, and logic. It was a lot better than Bigmouth in my opinion, but it still really missed the mark for me. There was still a lot of gross shock value jokes, and I've tried to avoid mentioning it because it's so obvious and not really relevant to my point, but the character design really makes it hard to take anything emotional seriously. I think Human Resources, as mediocre as it was, gave us pretty much what I can only describe as Bigmouth but better. A collection of stories that follow people going through some of the most human moments in their lives. Bigmouth could have, and in my opinion really should have been the same. Puberty is probably one of the most awkward and confusing times in a person's life, so just imagine if Bigmouth took puberty, you know, the thing the whole show is more or less based around, as seriously as it did with the subjects they tackle in Human Resources. Now I'm not saying they couldn't make it funny or lighthearted, but I just feel like they could have handled it a lot better. Okay, me bitching about how disappointing Bigmouth was is all well and good, but I think it's only fair that I give some ideas on what I do personally. Before I get into that though, I just want to say that obviously it's a lot easier for me to sit in my room with the benefit of hindsight and change something that already exists off my own back with no real deadlines or input from anyone else, than it is for a team of writers to create something from scratch for TV. This is just one dude's opinion on a show that he could probably never make himself. First off, I definitely figure out who this show was for and write accordingly, because like I said, I feel like one of the glaring problems for this show is it really doesn't seem to know who it's for, and I think that seriously makes the show a lot worse than it needs to be. For example, if I was going to make Bigmouth a show that was, say, TV-14, I'd want the show to be a lot more informative. Not so much that it's one of those weird videos on puberty they make you watch in high school, but something that teenagers could watch and feel like the characters are going through what they're going through, maybe even connect with it. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, if I were to make Bigmouth with a TVMA rating in mind, I'd do one of two things. For one, I'd try to age the characters up like to 17 or 18 if I could, because I can't imagine a show targeted towards older teenagers and adults that focuses on puberty starring 13-year-olds being more captivating as it would be if the characters were closer to the age of the viewers. Or, and this is probably a worse idea since I think it would make Bigmouth a totally different show, but in a way, I feel like it could work, and the more I think about it, the more I like it. I'd fully age up the characters and have the show be almost more of an anthology type show where the characters would just hang out and talk about the times as kids going through puberty, and it would flash back to that time while the characters narrated it. I wouldn't want them to be fully narrated, they could probably do fine without the narration, but possibly something like what the characters in the MTV show Downtown would do when they tell stories to each other. I made a video on Downtown by the way, go watch it, it's certainly a better show than this to talk about. You could still have the hormone monsters here, and it could either be something they all have in common, or something that none of them ever mention when they're talking about it. Like I said earlier, a few of the things in Bigmouth were based on things that actually happened to Nick Kroll and Andrew Goldberg, so I can imagine how natural it'd feel if they were just talking and joking about how awkward and embarrassing their time going through puberty was. Another thing that I do is I completely rework the hormone monsters and how they impacted the show. I haven't really mentioned them that much in this video, which is pretty amazing considering how big of an effect they have in Bigmouth and how much of the show is centered around them. The hormone monsters, especially Maury, definitely steal the show, which can be funny at times, but I also feel like it's a little detrimental. It might just be me personally, but I feel like the idea that the hormone monsters and all the emotional creatures in Human Resources are all sentient living beings outside of people kind of takes away from the whole show for me. You can disagree with me and think that's dumb, and that's totally fine since everyone's entitled to their own opinions, and I'm really not looking to get into a heated debate about Bigmouth of all shows. I just feel like Bigmouth makes it out that a lot of the things that the characters do in the show are more of the hormone monsters' ideas, and it'll almost make the characters do them. Which I know isn't actually the case in the show, but I feel like they could have made the hormone monsters a little less active in the show. What I would do is make them a lot less of the focus. Two shows I think did the whole angel on the shoulder thing a lot better is Eric Carkel's Netflix series Tear Along the Dotted Line and This World Can't Tear Me Down. Two absolutely amazing series. If you haven't seen, I highly recommend, especially the first one. I think what they did with Zero's conscience was a huge step in the right direction of what Bigmouth should have done. In Zero's shows, his conscience is an armadillo that every now and then will show up and call Zero out on something that he's done. What makes it so great is it'll only show up sparingly, and when he does, it feels a lot more like Zero's thoughts and feelings personified than the hormone monsters in Bigmouth do. Quick side tangent about those two shows real quick. I don't know why they did it, but recasting Zero's conscience in its second series is probably the only negative thing I can think of, which might just be my own personal bias since I can't stand James A. Caster. Anyway, back to Bigmouth. What I would do is try and reduce the amount of screen time that the hormone monsters have, since yeah, they're probably some of the most enjoyable characters in the show. And I use the word enjoyable very loosely. They also kind of distract from the actual characters, and I'd also make it that when they do appear, I'd want it so that when the characters were about to do something driven by puberty, I'd try to make it more like it was their idea and not Maury or Connie pushing it onto them. I'd really want it to feel like the hormone monsters are literally just hormones in the characters' heads and not actual monsters. And the most important change that I would make is just removing all the full-blown child nudity. I don't even need to give a reason why. You can easily tell all the stories you want in the show without. Okay, so that's it. That's a quick little poorly done idea of what I'd do if I had any control over Bigmouth. It's not perfect, hell, it might not even be good. But I feel like it's different enough that it can make Bigmouth slightly better, if not more appealing than it already is, because that's what I think the worst part of it is in my opinion. I don't think the show's completely awful, but I don't like it just because it's not pleasant to watch. I dragged my friend over to watch the newest season. We almost checked out a couple times because just how awkward and gross it felt to watch. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter now, since Human Resources was cancelled in its second season and Bigmouth only has one season left before it's done, but you never know. There could be another spin-off or more seasons. It honestly wouldn't surprise me. They somehow managed to get 8 whole seasons the first time, so clearly they're doing something right. I just hope that whatever they do, they learn from the mistakes they made with Bigmouth first time around. Jesus Christ, I can't believe I actually made a video on Bigmouth, and I can't believe that you're still here. Thank you for sticking around. I'm so sorry for making you have to hear me talk about this show for 10 minutes. I'm pretty sure I've said Bigmouth like 30 times in this video. If you want to clear your head, go watch one of my other videos. I promise none of them are about Bigmouth, so that makes them infinitely better than this one. Or subscribe so you don't miss out on whatever I share out next. I'm going to be talking about something I really enjoy in the next video to recover from this one, so I'm pretty excited to share it with you guys. But that's all I got for this one. I'll see you dudes later.
Rusted root isn't rusty at all. Homeway.